Hey everyone, today we're jumping into a huge topic, AI fairness. And look, this goes way beyond just cleaning up some data. It's really about the core of how we build artificial intelligence that works for everyone, equitably. So let's dive right in.
So, to get us started, I want to throw a big question out there. Can an algorithm actually be sexist? Now, I know that sounds like something out of a philosophy class, but believe me, it is a very real problem that some of the biggest tech companies in the world have already crashed into, headfirst.
And to really get a feel for what's at stake here, let's kick things off with a real-world story. This is what happens when a piece of code, something that's supposed to be totally objective, ends up doing the discriminating itself.
Okay, so picture this. It's 2014, and Amazon decides to build an AI to make hiring easier. The goal seemed pretty smart. Create an algorithm that could screen resumes by learning from a decade's worth of their best hires. But just 1 year in, they spot a massive problem. The model was actively penalizing female candidates. And even after years of trying to fix it, they just couldn't. The whole project had to be scrapped.
So what on earth went wrong? Well, the crazy part is, the AI did exactly what it was told. It looked at 10 years of hiring data from a tech industry that, let's be honest, was and still is mostly male. So it learned that the best candidates were usually men, and it taught itself to downrank resumes that even had the word woman's in them, like if someone wrote they were the captain of the women's rowing team. Just wow.
And here's the part that's just wild. The engineers at Amazon, they tried to fix it, right? They told the system, hey, ignore explicitly gendered words. But it didn't work. The AI was too smart for that. It just found other, more subtle clues, other words and phrases in the resumes, to figure out who was a woman and penalize them anyway. The bias was baked so deeply into the data that the only real choice was to pull the plug.
And that whole story just perfectly sets up our next point. You always hear that phrase, right? Garbage in, garbage out. The idea that bias in AI is just a data problem. But the reality is so much more complicated than that. So the myth is that the model is just a mirror. It just reflects the biases that are already out there in the world. But the reality is that the model can also be a magnifying glass. The choices that engineers make when they're actually designing the thing, what it's optimizing for, can take existing biases and make them even worse.
I absolutely love this analogy. Think about building an AI model like you're building a house, but you've got a fixed pile of bricks. If you decide to pour all of your resources, all of your bricks, into making one thing perfect, like overall accuracy, that's your big, impressive living room, well, guess what? You've got fewer bricks left for everything else, like making sure the model is fair to smaller groups. Every single design choice is a trade-off.
So if the problem is this complex, if it's about the data and the design, where do we even begin to fix it? Well, the first step is you have to be able to measure it. We need a way to define what fair actually means, in a way that a computer can understand.
And the main tool we have for this is something called a fairness metric. It's basically just a math formula that lets us audit an algorithm. It's a way to check under the hood and see if its results are actually equitable across different groups, whether that's based on gender, race, or anything else. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. There isn't one single universal definition of what's fair. Does it mean every group should get a positive result at the exact same rate? Or does it mean the algorithm should make mistakes, both false positives and false negatives, at the same rate for everyone? The answer really depends on what you're trying to do.
So let's compare two different ways of thinking about this. On the one hand, you've got something called demographic parity. This is all about equal outcomes. Are we hiring people from different groups at the same rate? Simple enough. But then you have equalized odds, which asks a totally different question. Is the model equally accurate for everybody? I mean, think about a medical AI. You'd want that thing to be just as good at diagnosing a disease for every single patient, right? So you can see, choosing which metric to use is a massive decision with very real consequences.
Okay, so we've seen the problem. We've seen how hard it is to even define fairness. So now, let's talk about solutions. And there's this really powerful idea for a solution that's actually borrowed from an industry that knows a thing or two about risk, the pharmaceutical industry.
The core idea is simple, but it's also kind of genius. Before any new drug gets released, it goes through years of super rigorous, multi-phase clinical trials to prove it's safe and effective. So the big question is, why on earth aren't we treating these high-stakes AI systems with that same level of care? So what would that actually look like? Well, it's a 4-phase process. First, you start in a closed virtual sandbox, like a lab test, to check for any initial bias. Then you move to a limited, real-world environment to see how it works in practice. Phase 3 is a super deep dive, a bias impact assessment, to really understand how this model is going to affect people's lives.
And finally, and this is so important, once it's live, you have continuous monitoring and feedback loops, so you can catch and fix problems as they show up in the real world.
Now, all of this might sound great in theory, but you're probably wondering, okay, how does a developer actually do any of this? Well, the good news is there's a whole ecosystem of tools popping up to put these ideas into action.
Yeah, this isn't just an academic chat anymore. The field of responsible AI is growing up fast. And now there are these powerful toolkits. A lot of them are even open source that give developers the ability to actually audit, visualize, and fix bias right in their own code.
Just to give you a taste, you've got IBM's AI Fairness 360, which has something like 70 different fairness metrics you can check for. Microsoft's FairLearn has these amazing interactive dashboards where you can see the trade-offs between accuracy and fairness in real time. And Google's got fairness indicators built right into its cloud platform. The point is, these tools are out there, and they're becoming a standard part of how we build AI.
But, and this is maybe the most crucial piece of the puzzle, tools alone aren't going to solve this. As this quote says so well, building fair AI isn't just a technical problem for coders to solve in a dark room somewhere, it's a societal challenge. It's going to take ethicists, lawyers, sociologists, and people from all walks of life working with the engineers. It's a human problem, through and through.
So here's where we land. We have the frameworks, we have the tools. The technology to build fairer AI is here. But that leaves us with the biggest and maybe the most important question of all. Who is responsible for making sure it actually happens? Is it the developer writing the code, the company selling the product, the government, or is it all of us? The answer we choose is going to define our future, something to think about.